Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a really fascinating section of Scripture. It's often called the Bible's Hall of Faith, Hebrews 11.
That's right.
And it's less about, mighty armies and more about a different kind of strength, the power of, unwavering belief.
Exactly. Hebrews 11 gives us this profound look into what genuine faith really looks like. Our main source today is Hebrews 11, focusing primarily on verses 1 and 2, and then verses 4 through 13.
Okay.
And our mission, if you like, for this deep dive is pretty straightforward, but I think really significant, to truly understand what biblical faith is, and then see how it actually worked in the lives of these key Old Testament figures, Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah.
Got it. So let's jump right in, the core definition. Hebrews 11, verse 1 kicks off with a really powerful statement. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. When we unpack that, what are the key things we need to grasp?
Well, the word substance is really striking, isn't it? It's not just wishful thinking or some vague feeling. It points to a kind of concrete assurance, a solid confidence in something that's objectively real, even if we can't, sense it right now.
Like a guarantee.
Almost, yeah. Like holding the title deed to a property you haven't physically visited yet. The document itself assures you it's real. It's this deep conviction in the actuality of what we hope for.
So definitely not just vague optimism then, it's much more grounded.
Precisely. The world often talks about hope as a sort of desperate clinging, maybe a last resort.
Yeah, like fingers crossed.
Exactly. But biblical hope, it's rooted firmly in God's trustworthiness, His goodness, His promises. That's what gives it certainty.
Okay.
And then there's the second part, the evidence of things not seen. This suggests a compelling inner proof, a conviction so strong that these unseen spiritual realities become just as real, just as tangible to us as anything physical. And often, the very things we truly hope for are in that unseen realm, right? Like Paul talks about in Romans 8.
That makes sense. So faith gives substance, a kind of reality to our hope, and it acts as proof for what we can't see. Then verse 2 says, "For by it the elders obtained a good report." Who exactly are these elders?
So the elders here, that refers to our spiritual ancestors, the Old Testament figures, the very ones we're about to discuss.
Ah, okay.
And this good report, it basically means God's approval. They were declared righteous because of their faith. We see that really clearly with Abraham in Genesis 15, for instance.
So their faith wasn't just some private feeling, it was actually the foundation of their standing with God. That's huge.
Absolutely. And the writer of Hebrews brings up these powerful examples for a specific reason, to encourage his readers and us today to keep going, to persevere in faith.
Right.
Remember back in chapter 10, it says God isn't pleased with those who shrink back, but with those who hold on to their faith for salvation.
Okay, definition and purpose, check. Let's get into the lives themselves now, starting with Abel in Hebrews 11.4. What's really striking about his faith?
Well, what's insightful here is that the text explicitly says Abel offered a more excellent sacrifice than Cain by faith.
By faith. Okay.
So the focus isn't just on what he offered, they both brought something, but the faith behind it. Abel's heart attitude, his approach to worship, was right before God. Like 1 Samuel says, God looks at the heart, not just the outward stuff.
So it's about the why and how of worship driven by faith. A worshiping faith, maybe?
That's a good way to put it. And even though Abel's life ended tragically, the verse says, though he died, he still speaks. What do you make of that?
It sounds like his example just echoes through time, doesn't it? His faithfulness continues to have an impact.
Exactly. A lasting influence.
Yeah.
His brief life had eternal weight because of that faith.
Okay, moving from Abel to Enoch, Hebrews 11, verses 5 and 6. His story's pretty unique. He didn't die. What's the faith lesson there?
Enoch's life really shows us what you could call a walking faith, just constant, close fellowship with God. Genesis describes it simply. He walked faithfully with God, then he was no more because God took him away. This translation, being taken directly by God, it's this incredible sign of God's pleasure with how he lived his life by faith.
Quite the endorsement, and that leads straight into a really key verse, Hebrews 11.6. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he is a rewarder of those who earnestly seek him. Let's unpack that. What are the core components of faith it highlights?
Well, it really lays out two absolute essentials for relating to God. First, you have to believe he exists, not just, mentally agree he might be out there, but a real conviction. He is real and has revealed himself.
Okay, belief in his existence.
Second, you have to believe he rewards those who diligently, earnestly seek him. It's not just believing he's there, but that he actively engages with and blesses those who pursue him. Enoch's walk clearly showed he believed both.
So pleasing God isn't fundamentally about rules or rituals alone, but this deep trust and belief. Okay, next up is Noah, Hebrews 11.7. Building that ark with no flood history, no rain even apparently. That seems almost unbelievable.
It really does. The verse says he was warned about things not yet seen. This massive global flood was coming. And his response, pure faith. He built this enormous ark.
Yeah.
Even though, as Genesis seems to suggest, widespread rain might have been totally unknown before then, it was an act of incredible obedience.
Stemming from
Reverence. A godly fear, the text says, like Proverbs talks about the fear of the Lord being the beginning of wisdom.
He must have faced unbelievable ridicule, though. How did he stick with it?
You have to assume so, right?
Yeah.
His actions were so out of step with everyone else that, as the verse says, his faith condemned the world. It just highlighted their unbelief starkly against God's warning.
And the outcome?
Through that faithful obedience, Noah became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. It's a powerful reminder that, well, living by faith often means you're swimming against the current, culturally speaking.
That leads us to Abraham, a huge figure. Hebrews 11, verses 8 to 10. His whole life seems like a journey of trusting the unknown. What's the core lesson here?
Abraham's initial call is just stunning, isn't it? Leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to a land that God will show you. He didn't even know the destination.
No map, no itinerary.
Nothing. And Scripture says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. That's just radical trust.
And he lived as a nomad, right? Even in the promised land?
Yeah, living in tents. A stranger, a foreigner in the land God promised him. It showed his perspective wasn't fixed on just owning that piece of dirt right then.
So his faith was looking beyond the immediate, the physical land, towards something else.
Exactly. Verse 10 tells us why. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God.
Ah, the eternal city.
His real focus was heavenly, permanent, built by God himself.
Yeah.
Far beyond any earthly inheritance. And think about the tests. Being asked to sacrifice Isaac, his belief that God could even raise Isaac from the dead, as Hebrews later points out, this is an extraordinary level of faith.
Absolutely. And then we come to Sarah, mentioned in verses 11 through 13. Her story is amazing too. Faith overcoming, well, what seemed biologically impossible.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the text acknowledges her initial doubt. Remember back in Genesis when she laughed.
Right.
But then Hebrews says, by faith, even Sarah herself, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. It shows this incredible growth in her faith, a journey towards trusting God, what the absolutely impossible.
Judging him faithful, that seems key.
It is. She moved from doubt to judging God's character as reliable, even when circumstances screamed otherwise.
And the result was astounding from this couple. Essentially, as good as dead, biologically, came countless descendants.
An incredible fulfillment. Hebrews 11.12 emphasizes that. From this one man, Abraham, came descendants as numerous as the stars and the sand.
Wow.
And then verse 13 wraps up this section beautifully. It says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance.
Admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth.
Exactly. It powerfully reinforces that idea of a pilgrim mindset. They knew their true home. The fulfillment of the ultimate promise was beyond this world.
So when we pull all these incredible stories together, what are the core takeaways about what real biblical faith looks like?
Well, first, it's clearly much more than just, agreeing with some facts intellectually. It's a deep-seated confidence, a solid reliance on God and his promises, especially when things are unseen or fulfillment seems far off.
Okay, confidence and reliance.
Second, as verse 6 hammers home, this kind of faith is absolutely essential to please God. There's no other way.
Right, impossible without it.
And finally, these examples taken together, they show us that we're called to the same kind of trust. Like them, we have to rely on God even when things are confusing or circumstances look impossible. We might not see the immediate fulfillment of every promise in our lifetime.
But we can be sure of God's faithfulness.
Exactly. We can hold on to that assurance because of who he is.
It really does drive home that pilgrim idea, doesn't it? That our ultimate hope and home are beyond what we see around us.
Precisely. And every one of these figures, despite their vastly different lives and challenges, they lived with that eternal perspective somehow shaping their journey here on earth.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Hebrews 11, maybe a thought to leave with you, the listener. When you consider these lives, Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, what does it really mean for you to live by faith today, especially when you're facing your own unseen challenges or waiting on promises that seem long delayed? Where truly does your own faith foundation lie? Something worth some serious thought.